Without further ado, your post finance officer class presented by John Dollinger. John?
Good evening. My name is John Dollinger. I have had the opportunity to serve as a post-op finance officer at 3 different times. I also chair the Department Finance Committee, along with the members include PDC Al Porter, Bob Flatchen, PDC Larry White, and Arnold Makowski. All right, let's get into the post finance officer. The first thing, when you become a post finance officer, the first thing you are going to run into is your installation. At the installation, it says you are the keeper of the money, and in you is reposed the financial policy of the post. That is, in a nutshell, what you're doing. They talk about budget, payment of obligations. From beginning to end, you're responsible for the money. Moving on.
John, did you want the PowerPoint up?
Yeah. All right, let's skip the first 2. All right. Responsibilities of the finance officer. He's the custodian of all of the post funds, not just particular ones. He's responsible for all of them. The bar funds, the game funds, donations, anything that is considered revenue to the post, he is 100% responsible for. Now, in some posts, they have a bar manager who counts the money for the bar. They have other people that, collect the money and count it. The issue is it doesn't matter who collects it, who counts it. The post finance officer is responsible for it. He needs to believe in the people that he has assigned or have been assigned to count the money. They are responsible to turn that money over to him. Now, I have a question. Is it required that the bar have its own bank account? No, it's not required. A lot of posts use their general fund to deposit the bar revenue in. Now, when we talk about post funds, we also have to talk about the revenue that comes into the sons and the revenue that comes into the riders. That money, in theory and in technical sense, belongs to the post because they are operating under your employee identification number, which is commonly called an EIN. They, as finance officer, you're responsible for that. And we're going to get into that a little more as we go through. Now, a lot of posts are having a little issue with theft. Anybody who handles money in your post must be bonded. When I mean money in your post, I am also talking about the sons and the riders funds. You need to make sure that anybody that handles cash or checks is covered by a bond. Generally, in a lot of posts, that is a surety bond. Now, if theft occurs, you have the ability with that bond to go back to the bonding company to seek some relief from the funds that were taken. I've had an experience with that once. It's difficult, but it works. Generally, they will pay you 90% of what you've lost. Moving on. In addition, on the next slide, you get into the fact that the sons and the riders need and must turn in financial reports to the post finance officer every month. He needs to be able, if the membership asks, to be able to report the revenue and expenses of the sons and the riders. So those reports need to come in every single month. The other reason you do that is, as a finance officer, you need to make sure that that the funds and the sons and the riders are being used properly. And that's an important aspect. We've had organizations where the sons and the riders are writing checks for more money than the post commander can write a check for without approval of his membership. So you need to make sure that the riders and the sons are playing by the rules and taking proper actions and taking them to their membership. Now, there's a couple of things. The finance officer in most posts takes care of the insurance program. Part of that insurance program, in addition to liability insurance, fire, and those things, you've got to get your bonding taken care of. We talked about that. The other thing you should carry is what's called directors and officers, or D&O insurance. More recently, we have had posts sued. And the problem you have is, if you're sued and the award exceeds your post's asset value, that post members can become liable for some of that loss. So it's important that you have directors and officers insurance, such that if the directors elect to do something incorrect, or the officers elect to do something incorrect, and they end up being sued, that insurance will cover the loss or liability. As I've said before, please remember the sons and the riders are part of your organization. All right, I know no one wants to know this, but it's a fact that you need to be balancing your checkbooks every month. We have posts that are not doing that. They need to be doing it. If you have a computer and are using QuickBooks or something, it's a very simple task. If you're doing everything manually, it's not, but you need to be able to balance your checkbook. While we're on the subject, check signers. I've had this discussion with numerous posts. The signatories for the rider's checking account and for the son's checking account should require one post officer signature. Now, I know that some people are saying the banks only require one signature now. I have an issue with just one signature. There is no check and balance if you have just one signature. As a finance officer, I could write myself a check and sign it. Not a good policy. Remember to have at least 2 check signers on every single check. I know the bank doesn't require it, but good financial control should. On the post checking accounts, commander, finance officer, and whoever the executive board or membership want as check signers, as long as there has to be minutes of a meeting where the check signers are approved. Generally, that has to be done at a membership meeting because the banks will require those minutes in order to open your checking account or to change an existing checking account.
Okay. John, you have a verbal question here from Judy Peterson.
Go, Judy.
Just to unmute.
What is the recommended amount of liability insurance for the post?
You need liability insurance is a reasonably expensive thing. I know several posts some go with 500,000, some go with $1 million. I think you need to understand what your liability potential is. At my post, we've had a couple of people get hurt going over the stupid traffic or bumper blocks in the parking lot. And that cost us, one case, it cost us $25,000. So you got to protect yourself against those types of things. As far as a solid recommendation, generally I would say to ask, your e-board what they want to carry. I hope that answered your question. Okay. Okay, as far as banking, generally we recommend that you go to an FDIC insured bank. And the reason to do that is if we ever should have banks fall apart for any reason, at least you have a minimal insurance coming out of an FDIC insured bank. The finance officer has a lot of responsibilities. He's got to pay the bills. He's got to process the incoming funds. Posts have asked me, should we have separate checking accounts for different things? My advice would be you probably need a separate checking account for your membership. And the only reason I say that is when you have a separate account for your membership, you're transmitting that number to National every time you send a report. And it would concern me that, today in our computers the way they are, people can hack into almost anything. At least if you have your membership in a second account, if somebody should figure out how to get into it, you're limited liability there. You need to have a general fund. Posts have funds for donations. Posts have, funds for scholarships. That's up to the individual post, how they want to set up their checking accounts and their incoming funds. As far as outgoing funds, obviously, depending on how you set up your income accounts, if you're going to pay scholarships, you probably need to pay them out of the scholarship fund you created. Why I'm on this subject, one of the issues that keeps coming up all the time, people will pay their membership fee and then not get a membership card for 3 or 4 weeks. And that is continually a problem. And they end up, calling post commanders, calling everybody in the world looking for their membership card. Post should be able to turn around membership cards quickly. When we talk about your general fund, some posts have, whether they're a savings account or whatever you want to call them, they'll put money into investments, into different places. Right now, you're not getting any interest out of banks. You're probably not getting much interest out of investments, but look around, see what's around, see whether there's something that's better than your bank for interest. The other thing I would say on managing funds, we have had some issues recently with posts, with people holding on to checks, posts not paying their bills in a timely manner. Those types of issues are post issues. We generally, anytime those come up, we send them back to talk to the post. One thing you need to remember, your post is an independent corporation. We can advise you, but our ability to tell you an awful lot, we can't do that. So, when these things come up, we're going to send members back to talk to their posts. If there aren't any questions, let's move on and talk about reporting the post finances. The finance officer is required every month to report to the membership the monthly financials. And that report should give the membership a clear view of the revenue from the post, both the bar and the games and donations. It should also show the membership the expenses for operations of the post. That's the only way your membership learns about your post, is through what goes on. And you need to say to them, in a nonprofit situation, we do not have losses and gains. We have a fund balance, and that fund balance can go up or go down. You need to say to your membership, our fund balance went down, our fund balance went up, but they need to know what's going on in the post. The other thing you should be doing is making recommendations as far as if the finance officer sees a problem, he needs to talk about it. He needs to tell people what's going on. That finance report needs to be accurate. I've been to meetings at different posts where they basically guess at what the finance report is. No, got to be accurate. You need to preserve your records. Your financial records are the basis of your tax returns, and you need to keep those. Generally, 7 years is what your accountants may tell you. But follow your accountants. They'll give you a good idea of what's going on. The other thing is, if you are using accountants and they're looking at your money, or they're running a closing every month and they give you a monthly report, just read that to the membership so they know what's going on. Okay. The next slide covers mentoring. Gentlemen, I don't think anyone wants to be a finance officer forever. You need to be looking around. You need to be looking around at your new membership. Who's out there that can follow you? Because if you don't find somebody to follow you, guess what? Nobody's going to get nominated at the next election, and you're going to need to continue in the job. And there's several people. I know many posts have had finance officers for many, many years. You know, you need to be able to take a break from the job. So look around, and when you find somebody, kind of begin to introduce them into what the job is and how you do the job. You know, if you have a computer system, let them learn the computer system. Get their interest going, so maybe you will have someone coming ahead of you. Let's talk a minute about post audits. Now, we're going to play a tape. This is a very timely tape. It came out today. Bruce, if you'd cue that up.
Investigation has learned the state's largest organization helping military veterans has been crushed by a major theft. Well over $100,000, money that was donated to help the veterans and their families.
CBS 4 investigator Brian Moss has been unraveling the details of the theft from Colorado's American Legion. Brian is here tonight in studio. It's just so sad. It's a great group.
It's a great group, and they're big. They've got 21,000 military veterans spread across 160 posts in Colorado. But the nonprofit recently discovered a huge amount of money missing. The worst part is they believe it was one of their own, a veteran, stealing from fellow veterans. Auditors are now sorting through financial accounts, reconstructing what happened. The American Legion's
I think that's enough, Bruce.
Nothing like this. This is very sophisticated.
Sorry.
You know, obviously, not only posts need to do audits, but departments need to do audits. That's the Department of Colorado. Just for everyone's information, the Department of Florida has an outside audit firm every single year do an audit of our books. Going back to post auditing, if you'll skip to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about audits. Regular audits should be done on each organization within the post, and I'm talking about the Suns, the Riders, and the Post. The auxiliary is a separately chartered organization. They're on their own. They have their own corporation. But regular audits of the Post should be done. You should have within your post ranks either an executive committee or an audit committee or trustees or a finance committee, and that should be their charge, is to audit the Post, to audit the Suns, and to audit the Riders. With the Suns and the Riders, generally the audit goes reasonably quickly. There aren't a lot of transactions on a monthly basis. But they still have to make sure that there's adequate documentation, that the checks all had 2 signatures, one of which was a post officer, and that things were deposited in a reasonably quick fashion, and that if there are any discrepancies, the audit committee has to report those to the Legion membership at the next regular meeting. In a similar fashion, the Post record should be audited. The change there is you can't have the finance officer audit his own books. So it has been suggested that the Post judge advocate oversee the Post audit. You know, and they're going to look at the financial records. They're going to make sure that the expenses that were incurred were within the bounds of the authorities of the organization. In my post, the commander can take any actions that are required up to $1,000 unless it's an emergency. Obviously, if you lose a cooler or a refrigerator, an air conditioner, you got to fix it. And you can't wait till the next meeting to fix it. So those things have to just be handled. That's where the commander comes in, but that's also where, even if you have to do those things and spend $4,000 or $5,000, you still need to go back to your membership and say, hey, this was an emergency, we did this. So when you audit the books, you should see what was written and what the limits are for the people that authorized it. You know, is it a regular bar expense or a regular expense similar to a bar expense? Those, most organizations just pay them. Now, how often should you audit the post and the post, the sons and the riders? Every quarter. You should be looking at their books every quarter. Now, the one other thing that has to happen is the audit team should issue a written letter to the post membership saying they audited the sons and found no problems, or they audited the sons and found the following issues. Same with the riders, same with the post. While it's uncomfortable when you have to talk about issues like money missing or deposit not made properly, it has to be reported. The membership has to know. Moving on. We've had an issue, and National is beginning to push this issue. The finance officer is responsible to file all the tax returns. He's responsible to pay the sales taxes, remit the payroll taxes. All of that has to be done every single month. Well, one of the other things that has to be done on an annual basis is the IRS 990. Every nonprofit must file an IRS 990. There are several different kinds. You know, if you're $50,000 or less, I believe it's the 990N, which is a postcard. If it's 200,000 or below, it's a 990 EZ. Above $200,000, you have to do a full 990. Now, everybody says, why do I have to do it? Well, it's very simple. What's going to happen if you don't do it is, at some point, the IRS is going to revoke your EIN. Now, when they revoke your EIN, you are no longer a nonprofit. It makes you, once it's revoked, you're a for-profit corporation, and you are subject to a for-profit taxes. Sooner or later, they will find that you are also, since you're not a nonprofit, you're not allowed the property tax exemptions. You may not be allowed sales tax exemptions. They're going to find those things out. The other thing, and this catches everybody somewhat by surprise, it's 3 years. if you don't file your 2015 taxes, but you file 16, 17, and 18, most probably in 2019, they're going to revoke your EIN. And you can go online and look. They'll tell you they revoked it, and they'll tell you that you're missing the 2015 taxes. You won't, at that point, I would strongly recommend a post, hire an accountant to figure out how to negotiate a settlement. Sometimes some of the big posts will have to reconstruct the missing tax records. Some will just be, some will just negotiate a fine. But again, what type of 990 you need to file, all of that, I would talk to a CPA about. Because CPA, tax professional, someone can, if you don't want them to file it, they can at least give you some direction on how to file it. So if there are issues with 990s, they're fairly serious. When you get it revoked, you're no longer a nonprofit. Guess what? You have to be a nonprofit to be an American Legion post. And right now we have between 38 and 42 or 3 posts that have their EINs revoked and cannot legally be an American Legion post, which is why National is now involved in looking around at this problem. So sooner or later, they're going to come knock on our door and ask us how many issues we have. So we are communicating posts that have the problem and trying to get them to fix the problem. One other issue with corporations. The state of Florida requires an annual report. It's due between January 1 and May 1. It's a fairly simple report. All it really asks is, your incorporation information, who the registered agent is, who the officers are, your address thing. It's a very simple form to fill out. It costs, I think, $65 a year. You have to file that between January and May 1. If you don't file it come the 15th of September, they will dissolve your corporation. Now, why is that a problem? If they dissolve your corporation, you are no longer legal. The officers, anybody who makes decisions for that corporation can be held legally liable for the decisions they make. For $65 a year, it's much easier to file it. We have about 18 to 20 organizations that I think it's as of the 15th of June had not filed and were dissolved from the previous year. So the finance officer, he needs to keep track of what's going on with the 990s and with incorporating your corporation. Anybody has any questions on 990s, whether you're legal or not, on your web page or on your website, you can go to irs.gov, ask for the revocation list. You go in, you put in your EIN number, it'll take you to a section, and when you pop it up, it will tell you whether you're revoked or not. And it'll tell you for what years, because the rest of the years that you've paid will be listed. As far as your state of Florida, whether your corporation's dissolved or not, just go to sunbiz.org. That's the Division of Corporations website, and put in your corporate name, and they will pop up your information, and it'll say right on there whether you're dissolved or you're in good shape. All right, moving on. Let's talk about financial controls. You know, there are a bunch of different things that go on in a post. You have the bars. You have to have some control, some accounting for what goes on in that bar. You know, a lot of people have gone to bar systems where they do it transaction by transaction. A lot of posts have cameras on their bars. I don't care, doesn't matter how you do it, but you need to maintain control of what goes on. The other thing is, let's look at your things like your tabs. A lot of posts use ad tabs. Those machines all have counters on them. They can tell you, you know, what the last number or how many tickets they had sold. You write that number down. The next time you open the machine, you write down the new number. You should have whatever that ticket value is. You should have, if the number changed by 1,000 points, you should have 1,000 bills, dollar bills, $5 bills, whatever the machine takes. But there's lots of issues with gaming. You just need to make sure that the post is being protected, that you're accounting for the money correctly. Let's move on again. Where are your resources? Well, you've got the officer's guide. You've got an adjutant's manual. We have irs.gov. If you have a lot of questions about 990s, they have a lot of very useful information there. Sunbiz, the Division of Corporations, they will walk you through how to file your annual report. Again, if you're a new post officer or you're a new post finance officer, talk to the people that have come before you. Talk to other post finance officers. Talk to your district commander. In most cases, they will know where there are people around that can help you. Many of the problems you're experiencing aren't new. All right. Best practices. Let's talk about what the best practices are. On a monthly basis, report the information to your finance or to your post membership so they know what's going on. Quarterly, have an audit, you know, done by the trustees. Annually, you have to file your 990, which means you have to be able to put together your financial reports. Generally, larger posts should have accountants or financial managers, whatever you want to call them, tax people. You need to be preparing for the annual audit. At department, we do our annual audit. It started in mid-September. It will run, it should be done the end of October. But, you know, they will ask lots of questions. You have to be prepared to answer. They are just the referees. All they're trying to do is take the information you give them and make sure that it passes muster. Again, on a monthly basis, you need to get the information from the riders, from the sons. You know, if we go back and look at it legally, you should be rolling the sons and the riders' information into the annual reports you make, into the 990s. I know most posts don't, and that's the Post's issue. As I said, you're an independent corporation. Department won't and can't tell you what to do, but there are things that need to be done to protect your financial viability. Okay, let's do questions. Anybody have any questions?
Got nothing.
Okay, any other issues anybody want to talk about? Well, I couldn't have answered everybody's question, but if you have a question, just text or email me. My email's on the slide. Oh, we got a couple coming in. Okay, Michael Dwyer says, we meet at the VFW Post. They have the bar and everything. We only do occasional bingo. That's great. It's very interesting. I came from New York. The Post I was a member of had a VFW in one side, an American Legion in the other, and the bar in between. So, there are lots of ways to do that. But again, if you only do occasional bingo, your gross revenue is probably much lower than $50,000. You'd fill out a 990N, which just is a postcard. It's very simple to fill out. Mr. Luke, who normally pays for the bond? Post or individuals? The Post pays for it. They would be the beneficiary of the bond. Major Stroop, are the slides available for us? We'd like to keep this as a resource file. They're certainly available. If for any reason they should be, as part of the rebroadcast of this, they should be available.
I have everyone's email that registered. I will send them out to the registered list of people who attended.
Okay. I hope that answers your question, Major Stroop. Any other questions? Okay, if we have no other, well, here's one. Thank you, Major Stroop. Okay, if we're all set, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. If anybody has any questions, again, you can get me on my email. I'm in the department roster if you have a question.
Hey, John.
Yep.
Someone, Chris Van.
Yes, I see it.
Okay.
Is there training similar to this for the sons? We can make that available without a problem. That's a fairly simple task. So we'll talk to the sons about that. Bud Boyer just put a question. Can a member ask for an itemized accounting of the Post expenses? Remember one thing, our organization is a membership-driven organization. Every part of that Post belongs to the members. they certainly have the right to ask questions about the finances of the post. Those questions should be directed to the post finance officer and the post commander. Any other questions? Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Have a good day. Be safe. And I hope everything's going well with everybody. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you, John. Good job. Thank you.